With Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, do the New York Mets have the best two players in the National League East? I'm going to talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor, where I wrote a piece this week ranking the top 10 best players in the National League East. And atop my list, you will find Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto. Now, how I came about this list, I went through WAR leaderboards. I went through just my own personal biases. I ranked 10 players in the National League East, but then I brought it to my editorial team because I don't want my bias to shine through entirely and create a list that's not accurate for how our site, our company feels about the top 10 best players in this division. And we came to a consensus. I don't really think there was much that was adjusted if I'm looking back on it, but this ended up being the ranking that we came up with. So number 10 for the top 10 best players in the National League East, you have Michael Harris II. Now, this was a spot that I had a lot of debate on because, spoiler alert, two names that aren't on this list, Pete Alonso and Brandon Nimmo. And you might say, as a Mets fan, why am I putting Michael Harris II over Brandon Nimmo? If you look at the WAR leaderboards over the last 3 seasons, Brandon Nimmo has been better. But to me, Michael Harris has the ability to be the best center fielder in baseball. And when you talk about someone who defensively is so great out in center field, his baseline floor is just so high to me that as we're talking about value, who are the best players in this division, I just think that Michael Harris has a ceiling that Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso can't quite get to when you're talking about overall value. Now, if this was top 10 stars in the National League East, Pete Alonso would be on the list. And if you talk about offensive impact alone, Pete Alonso's ability to go 40 and 100 this year with home runs and RBIs would be much better than Michael Harris. But I look at Michael Harris and say, this guy can go 20-20. Hasn't done it yet. I think he came one home run or maybe it was a stolen base shy in his rookie season. But I think it's a pretty fair expectation that over a full healthy season, Michael Harris could be a 20-20 guy playing Gold Glove defense in center field. And when you put that all together, it's going to be a 5-win player. We're going to talk a lot about WAR throughout the show today. When you're looking at the best players in baseball, there's different lines in the sand that you can talk about when it comes to WAR. And again, for those of you who aren't familiar, WAR is wins above replacement. It puts a value on players and allows you to rank them across the league to see who are the most valuable players. It accounts for base running, accounts for hitting, of course, and defense. It is a full package of what a player brings to the table. So when you talk about WAR in the game, you get anything above 6, you're talking about elite players in baseball. Anything above 4, you're talking about really good players in baseball. And then what happens in between is where you get to these rankings. So I got Michael Harris as number 10 because I think he has 5-win potential, even better than that, honestly, in his best season. Number 9, I got Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber is as consistent of a power source as you're going to find in Major League Baseball. And he gets on base at a really good clip, too. That's a little bit different than Pete Alonso. Alonso's going to give you the home runs and the RBIs. Not necessarily going to get on base. Kyle Schwarber last year got on base at a 366 clip, hit 34 bombs, 104 RBIs. I believe it's 3 years in a row for Schwarber with 100-plus RBIs. He's been very effective. Number 8, now remember, this has to take into account what we saw last season and who was arguably the best hitter in this division last season. It was Marcell Ozuna. Ozuna hit 302, 378 on base, 546 slug. He had 39 homers, 104 RBIs, 4.7 wins above replacement as a DH, which is not easy to do because you're bringing nothing to the table defensively. As a DH, you get docked constantly in your WAR numbers, and a 4.7 WAR from a DH is pretty impressive. Number 7, I have Trey Turner. Trey Turner has the ability to be a top 5 player in this division, but we haven't seen it yet in his first 2 years with the Phillies. Last year, He did hit 295, got on base at a 338 clip, played 121 games, 21 home runs, 19 stolen bases, a 3.9 F4. Now we move to number 6. Matt Olson, for me, was at number 6 because he has the ability to really carry a lineup in a way that few sluggers do. We saw what he did when he cleared 50 home runs in 2023 last year. It was a down season. Still 29 homers, 98 RBIs, 2.6 F4. He's also a great defensive first baseman on top of it. So if you're talking about ranking Pete Alonso against Matt Olson, as much as I am a Pete Alonso apologist, I can't say that he is better than Olson at this stage. Number 5, I went with a third baseman. That's Austin Riley. Austin Riley had a rough year last year, dealt with, what was the injury he had? I'm trying to see it. It was an oblique injury, which is brutal for a hitter. Sapped his power. Once he got going after the first couple months of the season where he hit 228 and only had 3 home runs in 42 games, you look at what he did in June. He hit 289, 373 on base, 536 slug, hit 6 home runs to triple his home run total on the season. And he continued to be great until a broken hand ended his season. But across 68 games played from June through August 18th, he hit 275, got on base at a 339 clip, slugged at a 531 clip, 16 home runs, worth 2.2 F4. So if you look at that over a full season, he was pacing to be the guy that he had been the previous 3 years, where he was a 5-win player 3 years running, hitting 30 home runs a season, driving in 90 runs. So to me, Austin Riley is a top 5 player in this division. Number 4, Ronald Acuña Jr. Acuña, last year, brutal season, really struggled. Then he tore his ACL. You look at what he did in 2023, he was the best player in baseball. 9 wins is what he put up in 2023, 41 homers, 73 RBIs. I don't know how to properly value Acuña right now because of the torn ACL and just my own perception that this is going to be a little bit of a down year for Acuña. I think he'll still be a good player. I think he'll be better than he was when he came off the first torn ACL in 2022. I think he has learned from that process. That time, he rushed back and got in the field in 8 months. This time, it seems like they're pushing more for a 10-month timeline. So I think Acuña is going to be something close to his peak powers, but I don't think he's swiping 70 bags. And because of that, I put Bryce Harper ahead of him in these rankings at number 3. I think long-term Acuña is the one guy that can push Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor for that title of being the best player in the National League East. But Bryce Harper is as consistent as they come. Last year, 30 homers, got on base at a 373 clip, put up a 5-win season, strong defense over at first base. Bryce Harper can win an MVP this year. I'm not going to completely say that those days are behind him. He is 32 years old, but he still has plenty of impact on the game. So Harper is definitely one of the best players in this division. But Francisco Lindor last year hit more homers, drove in more runs. He was 2.6 wins better when you're talking about WAR. Stay on the field more, provides premium defense at the most premium position of shortstop. There's no question to me at this stage of the game that Francisco Lindor is a better overall player than Bryce Harper. Bryce Harper, the more impactful hitter. Bryce Harper, the guy you might want up in a playoff game. Francisco Lindor is unbelievable still, though, as an all-around player over a full 162 games. There's only a few guys you'd want more than Lindor. And when you talk about the WAR leaderboards since 2015, so this is the last 10 years, with Francisco Lindor making his debut in 2015. He is third on the WAR leaderboards. You have Mookie Betts, Mike Trout, Francisco Lindor, Aaron Judge, Jose Ramirez, and Jose Altuve. Those are the 6 guys that have eclipsed 50 wins over the past decade. It just shows the incredible impact for Lindor, who has averaged about 5.5 wins a season for 10 years running. In the last couple years, the last 3 years in particular, he has consistently been at least a 6-win player, which is the upper echelon of the league. I want to talk about that a little bit more in the next segment, what the upper echelon of the league is, and then we'll get back to these rankings as I really break down how this division is made up when it comes to star power and where the Mets can get an edge on these other teams when it comes to winning the division thanks to their top 2 players. We'll talk about all that in just a minute. First, though, a quick word from our sponsors. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to get to 13,000 subscribers by opening day. We're nearly at that halfway mark at 12,500, something like that right now. I appreciate all of you for helping us get to this goal. Make sure you hit that red button to subscribe. All right, let's talk about the WAR leaders in baseball over the last couple seasons. Last year, if you look at this division in particular, Francisco Lindor had the best WAR, 7.8. Bryce Harper, 5.2. Ozuna, 4.7. Trey Turner, 3.9. Alec Boehm, 3.5. Kyle Schwarber, 3.4. Mark Vientos, 2.9. Brandon Nimmo, 2.7. Then you have Olsen at 2.6. Riley at 2.4. Alonso at 2.1. Michael Harris at 2 wins. Looking at those WAR numbers, I could see why you would say, man, why isn't Brandon Nimmo on this list? To me, he's right on the edge of it, and it was a coin flip between Nimmo and Michael Harris. It really was. Pete Alonso is just not going to rack up the WAR that would have him push a little bit higher in this list, but he is still just missed, and he has a chance to provide a big impact with his bat. You look at 2023. You had Acuña at 9.1 wins above replacement, Matt Olson at 6.5, Lindor at 5.5, Riley at 5.1, Sean Murphy at 4.9, Nimmo, Trey Turner, Bryson Stott at 4.2, Ozzie Albies at 4.1, Michael Harris at 3.8, Bryce Harper at 3.5. So in 2023, there was 2 6-win players. Lindor was the closest to it at 5.5. Riley, the only 5-win player. You look at 2022. You have, in the National League East, JT Realmuto, Dansby Swanson, and Francisco Lindor as the 3 guys that eclipsed 6 wins. And if you look across Major League Baseball in 2022, there was 16 players that eclipsed 6 wins. 2023, there was only 8 players that eclipsed 6 wins above replacement. Acuña and Olsen, the only 2 from the NL East. Juan Soto did it for the Padres out in the NL West. And then last year, there was 10 players who eclipsed 6 wins across the season. Lindor was the only player from the National League East to do it. Soto had an 8-win season out in the Bronx. If you look at the projection models, ZiPS is one of FanGraphs projection systems, tells you what players should do across a given year. And if you look at the projections for the upcoming season, which are always going to be, a baseline, right? They come up with sort of the 20 end of what a player can do, the 80 end, and they meet somewhere in the middle as far as what the projection is. So they're always going to be conservative compared to the numbers that guys will actually put up, because they're never going to predict that a player is going to have an anomaly of a 10-win season, even though last year Aaron Judge and Bobby Witt Jr. did exactly that. So when you're talking about the projection for the upcoming season, there's 6 guys who are projected to be 6-win players. Aaron Judge at 7.7, Shohei Ohtani at 6.5, that's hitting alone. Juan Soto at 6.5, Bobby Witt Jr., Gunnar Henderson at 6.1, Francisco Lindor at 6. Ronald Acuña Jr. is projected to have a 5.1 win season, and that's over 121 games. So that does show you that Acuña is the closest when it comes to what the projection models think to a Soto or a Lindor. But as we look at the best 10 players in this division, 5 of them I had were Braves, 3 of them were Phillies, and then just the 2 Mets. And then the 2 honorable mentions from the Mets were maybe 11 and 12 on this list, and Nimmo and Alonso. The other guy that I had an honorable mention in the article was James Wood. We'll talk about him a little bit more in the next segment as we look at the future of this division when it comes to the best players in it, and where I think he will eventually stack up. But he is a 22-year-old that has the ability to really, burst onto the scene this year and make a name for himself as one of the best players in the game. When you look at overall team WAR, the best teams in baseball over the last couple of years have gotten to 30 wins. And that is important here when we talk about Francisco Lindor and Juan Soto, because if you look at this division and you look at trying to put together WAR among star players, the Braves having 5 guys on this list, and that's not even including Ozzie Albies or, potentially a Sean Murphy, but particularly Albies that, could be in that running for top 10 players in the division. If all of those guys, if all 5 of them put up 4-win seasons, that's 20 wins above replacement. And again, to have a good team, you want to have a 30-win ball club when it comes to WAR. Last year, the Diamondbacks and the Dodgers led Major League Baseball with 33.8 wins above replacement from their position players. The Yankees were right behind at 33.7. The Mets were at 25.9. They were ninth, one of 9 teams to clear 25 wins. So to be a top 10 team in baseball, typically that's another benchmark to get, 25 wins above replacement. In 2023, the Braves led Major League Baseball with 40.9 wins above replacement. They were unbelievable that season. The Rangers, the Dodgers, the Rays trailed behind them at 34.1, 32.3, and 31.8, respectively. The Mets were 14th in Major League Baseball at 18.5 wins above replacement. You look at 2022, the Mets were a top 5 team in the game. One of 6 teams to clear 30 wins. The Mets had 31.2 wins above replacement. They were 5th best. The Dodgers led the league at 37.5. Yankees at 34.3. Blue Jays 33.5 to round out the medal stand of the best 3 teams in Major League Baseball in 2022. The point of all of this is for the Mets to have a great offense and just a great lineup. For a team to be as consistent on that side of the ball where there's clearly less questions than on the pitching front. For the New York Mets, they have to get to 30 wins. How do you get there? Well, here's where Lindor and Soto make such an impact because last year they combined for 15.8 WAR. So they got more than halfway there themselves. Now, is Juan Soto going to put up another 8-win season? That's going to be tough. I think Lindor is a better pick to have the high WAR just because he gives you such a strong baseline with his defense at shortstop. That's always going to be the thing that pushes Lindor along. That's why he's been one of the most valuable players in baseball over the past decade. A lot of that is defensive WAR, but it's also the fact that he is an above average hitter that can be a 30-30 guy this season. If you get 15 wins between the two of them, so they average 7.5 each, which is asking a lot, but not outside the realm of possibility. If Mark Vientos chips in 3.5 wins, last year was 2.7, didn't play the full season, so we're going to round it up to 3.5. Let's say Pete Alonso has a good WAR season for him, which isn't outstanding, but it's 2.5 because his defense consistently docks him. And let's say Francisco Alvarez can be the 3rd most valuable Met because he brings you so much defensively at catcher. He has a 4-win season. Well, that's another 10 WAR. So now all of a sudden, you started with Lindor and Soto at last year 15.8. Let's call it 15. You chip in those 3 guys, that's another 10. And I didn't even mention Brandon Nimmo, who I think has the ability to be somewhere in the 4 to 5 win range. So now if you're looking at your roster of position players and trying to be a top 5 team in baseball, you have between Soto, Lindor, Nimmo, Vientos, Alonso, and Alvarez, 6 guys that could average 5 wins apiece because you're going to get the extra couple wins from Soto and Lindor, where instead of getting their 5, you might get the 7, the 8. You never know. If Lindor had his best possible season, if he did what he did from June on, but from opening day on instead, he probably would have been closer to a 10-win player than an 8-win player. So that just shows you the impact that these 2 guys can have, where you have the best defensive shortstop in baseball, the best on-base threat in the game in Soto, a top 3 hitter overall in Juan Soto. They're going to impact the Mets day in, day out in a way that no other 2 players really can in this division. And in baseball, if you're talking about other duos that are of this caliber, it's Mookie Betts and Shohei Ohtani for the Dodgers. And then who else? Who else? Look at the Padres. Maybe it's Tatis and Merrill. That's a good duo. You look at the Yankees, it's Judge and whoever because Judge is that good, but there really isn't a Robin to his Batman anymore. Maybe you look at the Red Sox and they have Rafael Devers and Alex Bregman, or Jarren Duran and Rafael Devers. There's other teams that have 2 really good players, but when we're talking about top 10 players in baseball, or in this case, I would even say probably top 7 players in baseball, the Mets have 2 of them. And that's something that only the Dodgers share in common. So when you look ahead to the 2025 season, while the Mets don't have as much collective talent as the Braves or even the Phillies in some respects, so I think the Mets overall have a better lineup than them, they have the 2 players that are the trump cards that could make this team the best in the National League East. It's going to come down to how far those 2 players take the Mets. But if they get tier 1 A+ seasons out of Juan Soto and Francisco Lindor, you have 2 guys who can win an MVP. You have 2 guys who might finish top 5 in the MVP together, guys that can combine to chip in 70 home runs and maybe I don't know how many stolen bases you're going to get from Juan Soto, but you're still going to get plenty from Lindor, guys that might score 100 runs apiece, might drive in 100 runs apiece, guys that really do change the math on how you get to being an elite team. And that's what's so exciting about seeing what they do for this upcoming season. To close out the show, I want to talk about this conversation through a longer lens. Who will be the best player in the National League East for the rest of this decade? Is it Juan Soto? Is it somebody else? We'll talk about that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios, and look what I got in the store. Went up and picked up another bag of my favorite flavor, the honey roasted no shells. These are such a delicious snack. If you're looking for a snack that is both delicious and nutritious, crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios, because Wonderful Pistachios, one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help you feel fuller longer. Personally, I love these no-shell varieties because it's just so easy to eat. I'm not necessarily a fan of cracking open every nut, but I know some of you are. And if you are, there are the in-shell varieties for the classic favorite. But personally, you can't beat the no-shells because they're just the best on-the-go snack, grab and go. You go on a golf trip, maybe you're on the road. Wonderful Pistachios are the snack to go to, especially even on your desk. To me, a little hungry before the show started, popped in a handful of Wonderful Pistachios, and then I was ready to go. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks on the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets sign photo giveaways. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. When we look at the National League East for the rest of this decade, there are a few players that stand out as the best in this division who will continue to be the best in this division. And really, it's the top 4 in my rankings. Juan Soto, Francisco Lindor, Bryce Harper, and Ronald Acuña Jr. Those are the best players in this division, and the Mets have 2 of them. I think they have 2 of the guys that are singular talents, guys that are on a Hall of Fame track, quite frankly. And I think when you look at the other players in this division, that is a separating factor. Can we say that Matt Olson or Austin Riley is on a Hall of Fame track? Not necessarily. Can we say that Trey Turner, Kyle Schwarber, any of those guys are on a Hall of Fame track? Hall of very good. I don't know if they're at that level. Bryce Harper, undoubtedly on a Hall of Fame track. Francisco Lindor, undoubtedly on a Hall of Fame track. Juan Soto, undoubtedly on a Hall of Fame track. If Ronald Acuña Jr. was healthy, Hall of Fame level player, hopefully he could stay on the field. You want to see the best players in the game out there. And this might be the last knee surgery, hopefully. Let's just say now that he's got 2 surgically repaired knees, he's good to go, and he is himself in the next 5 years. That's the one guy I look at in this division that can challenge Juan Soto's throne of being the face of the National League East, the best player in the National League East, or particularly the best hitter in the National League East. He has shown that ability. It's just a matter of if he's going to get there, and particularly this year, will he get close to there? I don't think that he necessarily will for this season. That's why this year I think it's pretty clear cut that the Mets have the 2 best players in this division. But if he shows health in 2026, Acuña might be the best player in this division, or it'll be him or Juan Soto. I think Lindor has the ability to just pace this division in WAR for the next 3 years, though, because he's a guy that's always going to accumulate in that regard because of the defense and the base running. But I think over the next 3 years, few in the national media are going to give Lindor that praise of being the best in baseball, or the best in the National League East. I think there'll be statistical arguments to be made, but practically how players are viewed, I don't think he'll be quite in that conversation. Bryce Harper, I think he has the ability to win another MVP, certainly. Does he have one more monster, amazing season in him? I think that's a distinct possibility, but is that as likely as getting that type of a season from a Lindor, from a Soto, or even from an Acuña? Probably not. So when you're talking about the future of this division, to me, it is those 4 players for the next couple of years where Lindor or Bryce can supersede the younger guys and have a better season. But overall, I think this has become Acuña and Soto's division, just like it was when they were two youngsters hitting the scene at the same time, having unbelievable success when Soto was a national. Now you're going to see it with Braves, Mets, these two players being the most prominent in this division. Beyond them, who else can enter the fray? James Wood is a guy that I talked about already. He is a name to watch in this because he's 22 years old and he has the potential to be a 30-30 guy. He has the potential to be a top 10 hitter in baseball. There is no ceiling to how good James Wood could be. We still have to see him get there. But in his first full season, this guy can be an all-star, and I wouldn't be surprised if next year when I'm ranking the top 10 players in this division, he finds himself on this list. I couldn't just give it to him. He's got to go out and earn it. But he's got as much potential as anybody in this division, and at 22 years old, in 5 years, we might be talking about this as James Wood's division. You never know. Dylan Cruz's teammate was the number 2 overall pick right behind his college teammate Paul Skeens a couple years ago. He's 23 years old. He has immense potential. He's another name to watch, but I don't think he's quite at the same level of a James Wood. And the last guy I'll mention, who could be the best player in this division in a couple years, it's Francisco Alvarez, because he gives you incredible value behind the dish. And if he was just slightly above average offensively, you're talking about a guy that could rack up 4 to 5 wins easily if he got to a point where he reached his ceiling offensively. We saw Francisco Alvarez, hitting for a high average, getting on base at a good clip, popping 30-plus home runs a season. He's going to be in that conversation. He is going to really be a WAR monster when it comes to his value, but he's not quite there yet. So that is the outlook, I would say, of the best players in the National League East. Right now, your top 4 are going to probably hold for the next few years. That is some combination of Lindor, Soto, Acuña, and Harper. You look at the Braves, they got Austin Riley, they got Matt Olson, 2 corner infielders that really have the ability to pair with Acuña to give them such a great trio that can win 100-plus games this year with ease. You look at Marcell Ozuna as a guy that's got a great bat. Kyle Schwarber, a couple DHs. Trey Turner always has the ability to be one of the better players in baseball, even though he's had a couple down seasons. Michael Harris could be the best center fielder in baseball by the end of the year. And then you have Brandon Nimmo, Pete Alonso, Mark Vientos, as other guys that aren't quite a top 10 player in this division right now, but can really impact winning. I am thrilled to watch this NL East race, across this upcoming season, because I think it's going to change constantly. And you have 3 teams that should be in it all the way through. Just a matter of who can avoid those really bad stretches, who can sustain the winning streaks. But I really think that you have a divisional race here where every single team or every single fan base, I could even say, well, both the belief in the clubhouse and the belief among fans, anyone could talk themselves into being the best team in the National League East from those top 3. Any of them. I would probably lean Braves just because they have so much talent across the board, really, but particularly on the offensive side of things and in their rotation. But if you really think about the Mets getting to, being the best team in this division and winning it, they have the pieces. The Phillies have an unbelievable rotation, and they have enough star players in their lineup. If Bryson Stott's a 4-win player instead of a 2-win player, if Alec Boehm repeats what he did, if they get, Brandon Marsh to be a 3.5-win player, and they're getting production from Nick Castellanos and Max Kepler in their outfield, the more and more guys they stack up, they could be the best team in this division too. So I think that race is super tight, and on paper, everyone can sort of point to the things they like more than the others, but you have teams that are going to compete. It's going to be a lot of fun to see how it all shakes out. But when it comes to the 2 most impactful players in this division, they both belong on the Mets roster, and that's what gives the Mets a potential edge when it comes to the end of this season. Where are they going to be? They have 2 guys that can drive them right to the top of the National League East. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's edition of Locked On Mets. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen or your first watch every day. And after your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports. I'm talking about Locked On Sports today with our local host from each team, league-wide host from each league. Find Locked On Sports today streaming 24/7 on YouTube.